working with, so the sound seems a lot better than the last time.
Well, I went the next day and listened to the whole thing, and there was no problem at all. I heard.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why
Clear.
the sound on the live stream is a different system. But the problem was the sound on the Zoom. And I just wanted you to let me know, I'm hoping that it will be much better tonight.
Well, so far so good.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
No breakups.
So I want to say hello to the live stream community and welcome to our continuing adventure together. Yeah, we are making our way through the Psalms here at High Mountain Presbyterian Church and wherever you're listening from. I do want to emphasize, I've been having conversations again with some of you who are regular watchers on the live stream. You are invited to join in the conversation, to be part of the Zoom. You can join around the table. All you have to do is send me a request. I do not want to just generally put out the link information for the Zoom because it can cause problems with people searching specifically to invade. And I don't want to have a big firewall up. So I will send you the link. If you have any interest at all, you don't have to come every week. You're invited to come and join the conversation. I think every study that we have is standalone. I mean, we read the text and then we have conversation about it, and I think that you could feel very much a part of whatever is happening, even if you've not been here before or if you probably won't be back every week. It doesn't matter. So, hello, Judy.
Hello. I'm
Welcome.
glad to be here.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Colette, we lost your picture for some reason.
Well,
There you
yes, because I said it.
Here you are.
Here you are.
are. Okay.
I can't find my little stand to put my,
Oh, okay.
to hold it. I'll try and be very still.
No, that's all right. It doesn't. It's fine. Like
You
as long as
still
we.
know that I am God,
Yeah.
right?
As long as we don't have to be worried that your house is spinning around. That's so. So how's everybody? How are you, Judy?
Getting better slowly.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. Keep getting better and stronger.
Yeah.
And how are you tonight, Colette?
Oh, I'm super duper.
Wow, good for you.
Okay.
All
Like
right.
to hear that.
I want some of that. You send some of that my way. So, all right. So why don't we just? We are ready to read. I think Psalm 9 and 10. I checked back. I think last week we did 2 psalms because the second one was really short. Is that square with what everybody else remembers? That we did Psalm 8. What is man that thou art mindful of him? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So then tonight we're starting with Psalm 9. And because the commentators, the scholars recommend it, we should think of this in 2 parts. Psalm 9 and 10 are 2 parts. You'll see how it works. It's like 2 pages of a tablet. One is one point of view and the other has another, but they belong together. And so we'll treat them as Psalm 9 and 10. The title given by the translators is Praise and Lament. And you'll see how that figures into what is actually part of the psalm. Okay, so if someone would like to read, we'll start reading at Psalm 9, which is the praise. It's a psalm, it's attributed to David, but probably written long after David's time and was used, these 2 psalms were used in the liturgy of their worship gatherings. And so we're going to read it with that idea in mind. Okay, who's going to read?
I'll read.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. It says, to the leader according To Macharen, a psalm of David. I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will tell all of your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. When my enemies turned back, they stumbled and perished before you. For you have maintained my just cause. You have sat on the throne giving righteous judgment. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You have blotted out their name forever and ever. The enemies have vanished in everlasting ruins. Their cities you have rooted out. The very memory of them has perished. He has established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He judges the people with equity. The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Sing praises to the Lord who dwells in Zion. Declare his deeds among the peoples. For he who avenges blood is mindful of them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Be gracious to me, O Lord. See what I suffer from those who hate me. You are the one who lifts me up from the gates of death, so that I may recount all your praises, and in the gates of daughter Zion, rejoice in your deliverance. The nations have sunk in the pit that they made, and the net they hid has their own foot been caught. The Lord has made himself known. He has executed judgment. The wicked are snared in the work of their own hands. The wicked shall depart to Sheol, all the nations that forget God. For the needy shall not always be forgotten, nor the hope of the poor perish forever. Rise up, O Lord, do not let mortals prevail. Let the nations be judged before you. Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are only human.
Okay, let me say hello to Alice and to Melinda.
Great.
Yeah.
Welcome, glad you're here.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good evening. So if you didn't figure it out, we're reading from Psalm number 9. That's where we're reading from. And I also am going to say, just in case it happens while we get into our conversation, I'm hoping we're going to have a new member tonight. So her name is Peggy, and she's been telling me that she'd really like to join. She's a little bashful, so she lives out in Ohio, and she's been watching our study and conversation online now for weeks. And so she did email me and say, listen, would it be butting in for me to join? And I'm like, come on, go ahead, join. And so I'm hoping she'll still make it tonight. She said she might be a little bit late, but anyway, if she signs on, her name is Peggy, it should appear that way. So what are your thoughts, for those of you who heard and are listening, what are your thoughts about this psalm? What do you hear? So I'll try to prime the pump a little bit and just say, we often get discouraged with the writers of the Psalms who want God to, destroy their enemies and build them up and You can understand that. To me, this psalm is a wonderfully balanced piece of writing. It's just, I don't know, when I was reading this yesterday and preparing, I thought to myself, if you're going to be in a relationship with God, and you're going to trust in God, and you're going to believe in God, you have to be able to live the long view. You have to be able to live the long view. You hear what I'm saying? It's like your faith, if it's grounded in life experience and God's way, you're not going to get an instant solution to any circumstance of injustice or pain, it just does not work that way, according to this psalmist. But the psalmist, in this case, is full of praise for God, but it has nothing to do with deliverance from any particular circumstance that they're in at the present moment. This Psalter says, I praise you, God, because in the end, evil won't win. Evil will not win. And he has these words that are sort of harmless in a way, and he says, all the evil and the wicked, they will go down to Sheol. Now, you need to be careful, or you might be thinking he's saying, they're going to go to hell. That's not what he's saying. He's saying the wicked are going to die. They're going to die. And with them, their failed plans to abuse the poor and to take advantage of unjust situations, in the end, are going to die. They will not prevail. And then he praises God for that reality. He says, I just thank you, God, for my confidence in the end that anyone who builds their life on oppressing the poor or bringing about injustice in the world is going to die, just like everybody else is going to die. But when they die, their wicked and evil ways will come to an end. And I think I heard the psalmist say, and I might not be around to see it. Like, my suffering might endure even through my whole life. But that is not shaking this psalmist's view that it doesn't matter. Because in the end, the bad guys are going to lose, and they're going to lose badly. And the people who follow God in faith are going to win. All right, have I got you started to want to say something yet?
Yeah, to me, it's a psalm of contrast. And, for example, 16, the wicked is snared in the work of his own hands.
Right.
That's the piece, the downside, the wicked. But then there's also 7, but the Lord shall endure forever.
Yes.
And so as you were reading it, Barbara, I just saw and heard, tremendous contrast of, some people uplifted and some people, down. It's very clear. Yeah.
And that's why I say I think it's for people who can endure the long haul. I think I always come back to this whole tragedy, the awfulness of the reality of human slavery, which was so much a part of the experience of the birth of this nation. And, there's people that will love to remind you that slavery endured, and in some ways, the remnants of it still endure for 400 years. And that's not a short period of time. It's generation after generation. But if you listen to the songs of faith of the people who became exposed to the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian Scriptures, they began to hear this theme. They began to hear this theme of, long is the night Painful and dark is the experience that must be endured. But in the morning, hold on, because in the morning, the truth of God will be revealed. And it may be after I'm dead. In fact, it probably will be. But that's what hope is. Hope is, holding on for what is not here. Right?
It seems that the psalmist is also trying to prod God into action at this point.
Yes.
Let those mortals know that you are in control and they are not.
Yeah.
Let the nations be judged before you. He is probably thinking he's not going to be around, that there's a long game to this, what's happening. But he's also saying, hurry up, God, and do your thing, because, the oppressed and the needy are being forgotten. And
Yes.
even though he knows they will not always be forgotten, and people will be judged on their actions, I think the psalmist is saying, okay, God, but let's get on with it.
Yeah,
Come
I
on.
think that really is clear in verse 13, because he says, "Be gracious to me, O Lord. See what I have suffered from those who hate me, and you are the one who lifts me up from the gates of death." And then he says, so it's a little bit like the psalm last week. He's trying to entice God and saying, if you do that, then I'll be around here to sing your praises.
Right.
He says, that way I can recount all your praises, and in the gates of the daughter of Zion, I can rejoice in your deliverance. So make me a member of your choir, God. Help me to experience relief according to your grace, so that I can continue to sing your praises.
Mm-hmm.
Good strategy.
Yeah.
But in the end, he does say, don't let me die. I don't want to die. But then he goes on to say, it's jumping ahead, but I just love the last verse. Put them in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know that they are only human.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. To me, that's just profound prose. It's just profound in terms of, sometimes the theology of the psalmist seems very animalistic and very revenge and reward oriented. But this closing sentence is, if human beings would just remember that we're human beings,
Mm-hmm.
then we might have a better sense of how to relate to the presence of a divine God.
Mm-hmm.
In my version, it has Salah at the end. And I'm just looking up what does Salah mean. And it says a gender neutral name of Hebrew origin as a variation of the Hebrew word Selah, meaning rock or boulder. But it also, it mentions that it's stop and listen.
Yeah.
Meditation, I thought it was. Yeah.
How is it spelled?
Selah.
Yeah. I have that too.
A lot of those words that are written in small italics along the way, as I've said before, they're like notes to the choir master. Like if they were saying this, repeating this in unison in the worship service, to me, when Salah gets there, when they say it at the end, it's a dynamic indication that says, now when you get to the end of this long psalm, you need to be saying this with confidence. You need to be like shouting this out, because this is one of the most important parts that the psalmist wants to That's why I think the reference to the rock, to the strength, this needs to be done strong. And so the choir director is given, well, there are dynamics. If you sing in the choir, you know there are all kinds of dynamics that come along besides just the notes. And in this case, I can feel it. I can feel it. It is, say this part with boldness. Say this part with strength and confidence.
It also mentions often it's a sort of substitute for amen.
Oh, right. So there you have it. It's like that, like how amen can function if you're not in a church that's afraid to say amen. If the preacher's preaching something that you agree with, you shout amen. You're like, yes, yes. And so this is a dynamic that says you need to hold on to this. This can be a foundation in terms of especially how you endure difficult times. It's not faith, the journey of faith and living by faith is not for the weak-hearted. It's also not for people like, the generation that we live in now, which needs instant answers. It is not that this faith with God and walking with God, if you have that expectation, you're going to be very disappointed. And I get, I'm just going to keep talking until one of you jumps in with something you want to say. So I'm just saying, unfortunately, a lot of preaching that I see mostly on television goes in exactly the opposite direction. It promises people that if you're living by faith, that the problems in your life are going to be solved now. Now is, pray for now. Now the solution comes. Now it will happen now if you're praying in the right way. But the psalmist, he's not unfamiliar with the difficulty of life. He sees how people who get into power need somehow they're not satisfied with the power they have, so they have to expand and then get a whole group of people to get under their thumb. But he's saying faith in God is going to require a long suffering, if you will. And that doesn't mean that your prayers will never be answered. No, it doesn't mean that at all. But the hope that sustains you through this life cannot be, I'm going to pray on Monday, and by Wednesday, my prayer will be fixed. Whatever it is will be fixed. It's not going to work. That's not how it works with God. It's a long haul.
Mm-hmm. But there is still some impatience in what he writes.
Yes,
because he also realizes that he himself is human. So there's, please, I understand, God, that you are not going to intervene directly, but I know someday all the wrongs will be put right. So why not do it right now?
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like to me that he's trying to say. Yeah.
I agree. And I think he's trying to say, look, I'm not gonna fall off. I'm not gonna get angry. I know it takes a long time, but could it not take a long time? Would that be all right with you, God? Would it be okay if I didn't have to suffer a long time? And
I think I can say amen to that as well.
Oh, I love this. I love this psalm. I have not ever realized how much I just really celebrate. But I don't know how to say it. It's so balanced in terms of its profession of faith, but its honesty. The honesty of it. And the honesty of, look, what's it like to be a human being? You can't become inhuman. You can't pretend that what you need today you don't need. You can't. You know, I was hearing on the radio today that, you know, that some of the conditions in the world, some of the things that are going on in the world today with some of the national conflicts, there's a whole new generation of human beings that are going to be living just a millimeter above the famine line in terms of the unavailability of food and the crisis that's unfolding in the world for access to food. I mean, famine, that's a big word. It's not, you know, that's not just, oh, we're not quite getting as much food on our plate as we wanted. Famine is famine. People living their lives out, dying of starvation. And so the people of faith, sometimes you'll read the words of faith from people who are suffering intensely. And they can express their suffering, they do express their suffering, but somehow faith and hope endure. I don't know how it works. I don't know. God help me. I don't want to be tested at that level. But somehow faith endures. And it endures usually in the language of the Psalter that says, I get it. I get it, God. My relationship with you was never transactional in that way. Like, I pray to you, and you help me out, and everything's good, and everything's fine. I get it. That's not what this is about. But on the other hand, I wouldn't mind a little deliverance right now. You know, wouldn't hurt me a bit. You know, I wouldn't mind. And so that's why I say I just love it. I love the humanness of it.
But do we not get so used to hearing, okay, famine here, famine there, famine everywhere, and then, you know, it gets overwhelming to what can we do with it, but yet the people that are experiencing it, how in the world do they have faith and hope that they will have deliverance?
That's
Look at the people in Ukraine right now. I mean, do they still have faith? Do they still, yeah. What are they thinking? You know, how are they feeling? What is their attitude toward God now?
and that's the $20 million question in terms of the experience of human beings and faith. You know, faith, it's a mystery. It's a complete mystery because faith doesn't really follow in terms of the experience of life. It just doesn't. And so where does faith come from? Hope, undying hope. I mean, undying hope is when your life, everything about your life is gone and it just seems to be hopeless, you still have hope. Where does that come from? And you'll find it everywhere. You find it in human experience around the globe. You find it in all kinds of experiences where people, you would say, it doesn't make sense that they hold on to hope anymore. It's way past making sense. But hope endures. It continues.
So where does it come from?
Well, I mean, it may sound like an easy answer, but I think that the history of faith is that hope actually comes from God. That hope comes as a gift from God. And sometimes if that hope endures in your life, you can learn to resent it almost. You can say, I'm tired of being hopeful, you know, but it still comes. The hope endures. It hopes through the night. It hopes through the suffering. And the amazing thing is that in some communities, where you listen about suffering and struggle, hope endures even to the point of death. You know, that it's never, in some people's lives, it's never rewarded. But the hope is not tied specifically to hope in a life after death or heaven or any of that. It has a strength on this side of death that gives you a strength to endure what's happening today.
I think we've all been through that situation. If we've ever had a family member, a friend, or something that you know that there's no hope for, that, you know, suffering from something or other, and you know there's not, that they've been predicted that they're not going to survive. But you still hold out hope that something, you know, that something will turn around. But you still have, even after, say, they pass, you still have faith.
Yes.
You still have to have faith that happens for a reason.
Yeah, and I think you have faith that hope endures. Hope endures even through death. It does. And so, however you imagine it, I don't know. I'm with you, Alice. I've seen it happen. You're longing for healing, for recovery. You really want that to happen. You're praying for that to happen. But as the person diminishes and the disease advances, your hope gets redirected, but it's still hope. Mm-hmm. And I see that's what happens a lot at funerals. That's why I love when funerals take place in church. Because in church, what is stirred is the awareness of hope that defies death, hope that endures. And you're stirred by and encouraged to hold on to memories. Memories provide an awful lot of hope, but also a hope for the unknown of the future, the person's, life after death. That is all mingled in there. But to me, the message is that life is not without hope, no matter how desperate it is. Even if it's, the Apostle Paul, I should memorize this verse because I try to quote it all the time, where he says, that as people of faith, we're knocked down, but we get back up. We're persecuted, but we're not discouraged. And sometimes we're persecuted, he says, even to the point of death. But even at the point of death, we are resurrected. It's not even necessarily an afterlife thing he's pointing to. He's talking about, somehow for Paul, the news of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, gives him a living power of hope in living a life that endures every circumstance of life. So he's in jail. He wrote most of the part of the New Testament in jail. He's like, and he's probably going to be executed. But you don't find in him, you don't see him minimizing the suffering he's going through. He's not minimizing it. But he's talking about the miracle that he has of the hope of God, which isn't always manifested in the present moment. It's not.
So miracle is part of the concept, or hope.
Yeah.
Hope and miracle of the sisters, maybe.
Hope.
Maybe.
Yeah. I remember I got a lecture from, I think I might have told you this story, but I always go back to the big moments of my life. And, in 1991, when Tropical Storm Floyd destroyed 3 towns in central New Jersey, and I was a pastor of the big Presbyterian church in that town. And it was a disaster. It was a level 5 disaster. I mean, everything was gone. The sewer systems, the water systems, everything was gone. And people were wandering around on the streets. 2,000 people lost their homes. And the National Guard had come in, but they couldn't really help. They couldn't get into the town. And it was just full of despair. Everybody was in despair. And so much had been lost in material things. Only 2 people died, which everybody was happy about. But you look around in town, the flooded one building out, caused a fire and a whole block of town burned to the ground in the middle of the fire. They couldn't fight the fire. It was awful. And so word went out that the community leaders were going to meet. They were going to meet in the Presbyterian church. And so I said, well, that's great. We have room. So we put on a coffee hour. We put the coffee out. We got some cakes and stuff. and the whole group, the social workers were there, other religious leaders were there, the disaster relief people were there, Red Cross, and the room was full. It was packed. And we got in there, and I said, well, I guess this is the time we said would start. Like, who's going to lead this? And the woman that was in charge of the community response, she had a big office in the county for disaster response. And she walked up to me and she said, what do you mean who's going to lead this? I said, who's going to be in charge? She said, you are. And I said, why me? And then she said this phrase, because when all else fails, human beings look to people of faith for hope. And she said, what this community needs right now is something that the government can't provide, something that the National Guard cannot provide, the Red Cross cannot provide. What the community needs is hope, tangible hope. And she said, and the people of faith are the brokers of hope. And actually, at the time, I didn't think it was all that great because it still ended up with me being in charge of the recovery. And I wasn't really all that excited about it. 6 months later, I told my church, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to loan me to the community. And I really wasn't their pastor for a year. But I worked in the community trying to organize and create response and create recovery because there was hope. And it wasn't just me. There were other clergy that were involved. But the congregations of faith, Jewish and Christian, we didn't really have any other denominations of faith. But we formed then the basis of the leadership for the response. And as far as the county government was concerned, that made sense. Because I think they were not particularly feeling all that hopeful for any of it. So, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I will never forget her looking at me and reminding me that it's supposed to be people of faith that have the depth to be able to rise up and to come out of a situation that looks hopeless.
And don't you think it was also perhaps because you had all gathered in one place, so it feels more like a community, and a community that is experiencing the same kind of suffering. So there's unity, there's a feeling that, okay, we're all in this together and we can all look for hope together. And that makes you feel like you're not forgotten.
Yes.
And that's part of what the psalmist is saying also. No matter what's happening around us, God is not forgetting us. Even though you think it may look like it, God is not forgetting us.
Yeah.
When we can all gather together and say we have hope, then there is hope.
Yes, I agree. And that's what the substance of things hoped for, right? That's so that as I think about those words, substance is something you can touch and see. You can't touch and see hope, or can you? Until you can touch and see hope when the communities come together, when you see these the gatherings of people that make a relief, or they bring change about from unthinkable circumstances. They begin to demand change, and that demand for change doesn't minimize anything of the disaster that is taking place, but it introduces something new. something new. That's why, was it Lincoln who said, united we stand and divided we fall?
Where we fall.
Because that coming together, that unification, which doesn't minimize the differences, but says our differences are not going to be allowed to weaken us in our common hope.
I think that's the same kind of feeling that you get when you see injustice on your television and you're sitting at home alone and you feel powerless and you feel angry. But if you organize and you come out and you demonstrate, or you go outside your elected officials' offices and everyone gets together and says, you know, this is unjust, whatever it is you're upset about. If you're in a big group, it gives you the courage to have hope.
Yes.
And you know, you really shouldn't sit alone at home all the time. You know, it's just not a good thing. We need to be more in touch with each other. And community is a real saving grace for human beings, sometimes for ill, but also for good.
Yes.
I think, just building on what you said, Debbie, I think community, and then what Pastor Lou said just a few minutes ago, you need leadership within the community, and who do people turn to? Not the police, not the mayor of the town, but they search for a man of faith, because somehow that seems to be that person will bring some, I don't know, species or some kind of comfort, knowledge, direction, whatever, to the community. So you need community, and you need, leadership of faith, maybe.
Right. It's no accident with the Poor People's March or, some of those movements that the clergy was always out front.
Yeah.
Or like a Martin Luther King suddenly from the crowd, yeah.
And actually, think about it, it's still going on right now. The Poor People's Campaign is continuing in the United States, and it's being led by clergy. And, I have to say, not all clergy are leading in the right way, but clergy are involved in a lot of the campaign. And I wanted to go back to a question that you asked, Judy, where does hope come from? You don't have to be a person of faith to experience hope. And because I would say, based on what Debbie was saying and how much I believe in it, hope comes from community. Hope arises in the middle of community. And it arises from the unity that can be formed from people coming together and putting aside their differences.
But isn't there also an ancillary to that if you're sitting at the bedside of somebody dying, somebody that you love, you still have hope, and yet you're by yourself,
Yes.
or maybe another family member, but it seems like it's two-barreled, the two-fisted, that it's community, but also solitary, maybe. Maybe it's not as powerful.
Yeah, I don't think it's limited to community, because certainly I think that for an individual, faith in God, especially if you're practicing it in such a way that it reminds you that you might have to endure, I think faith in God, then God delivers hope. And then where does faith come from? I mean, in the Christian tradition, the reformers, which are my tradition, made a big deal out of the fact that faith, if you have faith, don't be too judgmental of people who don't. Because you got your faith as a gift from God. It wasn't anything you do. It's not anything you earn. It's not because you're a better person. If you wake up in the morning and you find you have faith, or you find you have hope, you should just simply look to the heavens and go, thank you, God, because you've received the gift. And then all the rest of the Reformed theology says, now don't take that gift for granted. You need to now put it to use, because if you have faith, that means you are part of that community now. You've got a gift that can then be a further gift to all the people of the world. Like you're given that gift of faith not just for yourself. It's not for you to just enjoy. It's for you to, yes, to live stronger, but to live stronger for the benefit of others as well. So I think faith can, hope especially, can be an individual experience. And when you're alone. But I like what Debbie said. You know, believe it or not, in my lifetime, there haven't been a whole lot of things that have gotten me up off the couch to go out and to march. I just haven't. I mean, it's, you know, I was on the tail end of the 60s generation that did a lot of marching for anti-war and all that. I never got really involved in that. And so the very first time where I was ever off my couch, putting one foot in front of another, was the Black Lives Movement. You know, and the parades that took place in this community in Oakland, which, you know, I thought we'd be only 3 people that would show up to march in the Black Lives Movement march. And I have to be honest with you, when we got out of our car and I saw thousands of people who came off their couches and were just declaring that we did not want to live in a society where this kind of thing could happen to people. And it was, I mean, it was moving for me, moving. I don't know that it went all in the powerful direction I was hoping it was going to, and I will still get back out on the sidewalk to march for an end to police violence. I know a lot of police officers who are very, very fine people. But I also know that human beings, like the psalmist said, my prayer for police officers is, God, remind them that they're human beings. You know, because they lose sight of it. So, that was a very hopeful day for me. And I experienced an infusion of hope in the present time because of the enormity of the responses of people who came out. And by the way, they weren't just black people. They weren't just the minorities. It was a hope that was resident and was resounding in the lives of people that I very prejudicially just thought didn't care. Colette, I'm going to put you on the spot. You haven't said much tonight. What are you thinking about?
Well, I'm thinking about when she said Selah. My mother's name is Zella. And she said it's a Bible, it's in the Bible. And I never found it, but when she said Selah, I said, I'll bet that was her name. It sounds the same.
It very well could be. You know what I will do for you? I'll go into my Hebrew, I'll dust it off, and I'll go back, and I'll see if I can find origins or derivations that came from that word, Selah. And maybe one of them will be Della.
Z-E-L-L-A.
D-E-L-L-A? I'll go looking for it this week. I'll see what I can find.
Z is in zebra.
Yeah.
I just looked it up. It says it's a Yiddish name, meaning happy, blessed, a gray fighting maiden. So it's a Yiddish name, which is probably...
It's a derivation from Hebrew. Yep, it's a derivation from that.
A happy, blessed child, I guess. So that's nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So shall we read the next one?
Sure.
All right, so buckle your seatbelt, because remember I told you this was like two sides of a tablet. It's, you know, it's the good news and the bad news, the good cop and the bad cop. So this first one is filled with all this inspiring sense of the enduring of hope and hold on, for the night is coming to an end and the morning is coming and the sun will rise and God will be seen as victorious. All right, so who's going to read chapter 10?
Okay, I'll continue.
All right, good.
Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In arrogance, the wicked persecute the poor. Let them be caught in the schemes they have devised. For the wicked boast of the desires of their heart. Those greedy for gain curse and renounce the Lord. In the pride of their countenance, the wicked say, God will not seek it out. All their thoughts are, there is no God. Their ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high, out of their sight. As for their foes, they scoff at them. They think in their heart, we shall not be moved. Throughout all generations, we shall not meet adversity. Their mouths are filled with cursing and deceit and oppression. Under their tongues are mischief and iniquity. They sit in ambush in the villages. In hiding places, they murder the innocent. Their eyes stealthily watch for the helpless. They lurk in secret like a lion in its covert. They lurk that they may seize the poor. They seize the poor and drag them off in their net. They stoop, they crouch, and the helpless fall to their might. Think in their hearts, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face, he will never see it. Rise up, O Lord, our God, lift up your hand. Do not forget the oppressed. Why do the wicked renounce God and say in their hearts, you will not call us to account? But you do see, indeed you note trouble and grief, that you may take it into your hands. The helpless commit themselves to you. You have been the helper of the orphan. Break the arm of the wicked and evildoers. Seek out their wickedness until you find none. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations shall perish from his land. O Lord, you will hear the desire of the meek. You will strengthen their heart. You will incline your ear to do justice for the orphan and the oppressed, so that those from earth may strike terror no more.
Okay. So, what do you think? What do you got to say?
Well, we don't like people who kill the innocent.
Right. And the question that the psalmist has is, I mean, in the end, you can see the similarity to the previous psalm, but the question is, does it need to be that the evil people have such a free hand in this world? Is that really necessary? You know, like that you know, these people roam about, they either say it with their mouths or the way they live their lives, that there is no accountability. There is no one who is able to hold them accountable, and that's why it says, they say there is no God.
I think it's kind of speaking to what in Islam we call taqwa, or God consciousness. The folks who do not have that quality of being able to imagine that God sees you at all times and knows what you're doing. If you don't know that, or if you don't believe that, you're free to do whatever you want, and it's mostly not good. In this case here, especially, it sounds like those people without God consciousness are like animals,
Right.
hiding in their dens, waiting to pounce on the innocent and the poor. And well, if God sees you, God knows what's happening. So again, I think he's saying, come on, God, you see what's happening. I don't know. It's where can, I guess the folks who believe in God still have their hope in God,
Yeah.
and that someday they will be vindicated and there will be an end to the suffering. But this one, I think, is much more pessimistic than Psalm 9, which sounds more hopeful.
Yes.
For a more just world.
No, I agree. That's what I think.
guess people who don't believe in God make their own hell on earth.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there is a much deeper pessimism here, because I think Psalm 9 is about a hope for a just world, a hope for things being righted. This describes in great detail the power that human beings have in exercising injustice, defrauding the poor. The question, the psalmist is like, why are you picking on the poor? Why? Go pick on somebody your own size, It's like, but instead, schemes are laid and people are, I don't know, people are taken advantage of. And why is that? Again, I go back to stories of my mom and dad. They lived a good life. Their life expectancy was that they were going to die by the time they were 80. And my dad retired at 55. He figured out his investments to last until they were 80, and they lived until they were 92. And so that meant the last 10 years of their lives, they worried about money a lot. And they had a lot of kids. Some of us contributed to help them out. But in the end, that day came when my mother answered the telephone, and there was a guy on the other end of the line that convinced my mother that he was from Publishers Clearinghouse.
Uh-oh.
And that my mom and dad had won, I don't know, something like $5 million. And he convinced her, so much so, they thought they were being, careful. They asked for some verifications. They got the verifications, but they didn't tell anybody because the man suggested that they not tell anybody yet, or they'd have a lot of people around them and all the rest of that. And so they didn't tell anybody, and they went down the road with this guy a ways, and ended up giving him some money. And, and the money they gave was not the thing that demoralized them. What demoralized them was that they bought it, and that they felt, after that, they felt completely helpless in the world because they thought they had their faculties together enough to not be taken advantage of. They didn't see themselves as foolish old people ready to buy whatever comes along. And I'm telling you, for the rest of my mother's life, I could not convince my mother to let it go. And I think to myself, what is the advantage for people living in the world? I'm sure these calls came from Pakistan or from some other far-off part of the country.
Yeah.
What's the advantage of making fools, just made fools out of both my mother and my father. And sadly enough, they got so confident that my mother confided in me. And she said, listen, I want to tell you there's some really good news. You know, we've won the Publishers Clearinghouse. And so I didn't believe it. Like from the very beginning, I didn't believe it. And so I tried to walk gently with my mom especially, and then she got mad at me because she thought I was being skeptical. And then when it became clear, you know, I said to her, get the man's telephone number and tell him you want me to call. And so when I called him, within 10 seconds, it was clear this guy was a fake. And then my mother could not talk to me for a couple of weeks. And that's what I think about when I think about the psalmist writing how, you know, the evildoers, they lay their net and they wait for the weak and the poor to walk into them, and then they snatch them up. Like, did it somehow make that man's life better to know that he had taken the last shred of pride and dignity from an old lady? I mean, really, is that, I guess.
I can relate to that, Lou, because my father was living in Florida. He was in his 90s, and he called me one day and he said, guess what? I won a whole prize from the Reader's Digest. And I'm coming up next week, and I want you and your two sisters to be there because there's going to be a big event, and I'm going to get, you know, a lot of money. And and I did the same thing. You know, I said, and I called my sisters, but my father came up to Westchester, and I mean, it was such a debacle, and yet it was very difficult to take away the fantasy.
Yeah.
You know, what it was, you know, that the Reader's Digest, it was a fake. And it's difficult to tear away the illusion, you know, that these older people, or people anyway, you know, have of getting a reward, a monetary reward.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't imagine that it turns out to a big financial gain for these people who run these scams. So then why do they do it? Like, what is the payoff for them except to, like, you know, Debbie said, like, they're like wild animals laying traps and snaring people in them. And then what, feeling good because they had, you know, defrauded some people who really bought their story? Does that make them feel good somehow?
Well, isn't it like the hackers, you know, the same thing? What is it? What's the pleasure that is derived from doing things like that? I don't know.
I think they disassociate themselves with the rest of humanity. You would have to. You would have to not see your victims as human. So, you know, it wouldn't bother you as much. They don't know you. They usually contact you on the phone, so they have no real association with you. And that way they don't feel like you're, you know, a compatriot or you're even human. You're just prey. That's it.
Right.
And they're predators. Yeah, right.
And my dad actually, all on his own, had gotten taken a couple of times. And, you know, my father's proud of being a critical thinker and, you know, thinking things through and all the rest of that. And so I had to sit with him and I'd say, Dad, you know, read the science. The science says that when you get to be 89 and 90 years old, your ability, actually your physical, mental ability to discern these things is severely compromised. It is. And so I pleaded with him and I said, Dad, I know you love being independent, but could you please just talk to me? Like, just reach out to me. Ask me. But he couldn't. He couldn't. It was too humiliating to him. So instead, he lost, I mean, at one point with one particular person, he lost about $15,000.
Mm. That's a big sum.
Yeah, and it was money he didn't have. It was money he did not have. And then my brother, we finally talked about this more in the family, and my brother said that his wife's parents lost everything. They lost their house. They lost every bit of savings they had, and they became dependent upon their children because they bought into a major scam. So, in the words of the psalmist, come on, God, come on, you got to stand up and defend the defenseless. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Where's the defense? Where is the defense of people who don't have a defense in a world that is filled with people who are hell-bent on taking advantage of defenseless people?
I think Debbie's right. I think that they have to be animals. I mean, how can you be human and do that kind of thing to other human beings?
I mean, the psalmist in 10 shares the same view as the psalmist in 9, in that the answer in the end is they'll get their just deserts. They will not get away with it. They will not be able, maybe in this life, but if you thumb your nose to accountability, you will either meet accountability in this life, or ultimately you will meet your accountability in the next life. But your viciousness, your preying on the poor, your gaining from injustice will not ultimately stand. And again, that's the faith of the psalmist. He believes that. But it doesn't do much to help the people that are in the moment.
Right. Yeah. I guess when it seems like there's no way to combat some of this evil, you have to at least hope and know, have faith that God sees everything and God will eventually deal out justice. It may not be in this world. It may not be in your lifetime, but I guess we're not to know.
Yeah, and I feel like I can hold on to that for a lot of my life. I feel like I can live into that, but I do run into circumstances where, it's hard. It's hard. Because I do see the psalmist is right, and there's other psalms that say, I see how the wicked prosper. And it just seems like their prosperity is unfettered. And it's easier for them to make a profit because they have no scruples, they have no limits. And so they can just make money and they can just build empires. And then the question comes back to God, why? Why? Why do you allow such things to happen?
Well, it's no different now.
No, it isn't. No.
As we read, the stories of the Old Testament, I mean, they could just be, the same, a different man with a different costume, a different name, but it's the same kind of some kind of evil.
Yeah, it repeats itself.
That we see today, yeah. It's just a different name, it's just a different time. Yeah. But it's the same, so does it ever change?
Yeah, I think I may not be able to evaluate this, but I feel like the schemes are more sophisticated today. Like
They have the internet.
Yeah, they've matured. They're very, very mature in their way of taking advantage of people.
Oh, or is it because you're getting older? Our children probably are more aware of the internet schemes than we are.
They probably are. You're probably right. But why did you have to say it?
Sorry. I'm in the same category. I second guess myself a lot, but I hate to say things about family members, but my sister often would do that publishers clearinghouse thing. And she bought what they were selling because she thought she had a better chance. And even my mother who was like a great deal older would say, you're never going to win that. Why are you going to waste your money on this? And still she put her faith in buying whatever, magazine that she didn't really need, but because it might give her an advantage and she would win this. And she would actually say to my mom, who had Alzheimer's at this point, look out the window. If you ever see somebody with balloons, answer the door. Be like, Katie, don't tell her that I'm with her. I'm not going to have her looking out the window for a guy with balloons. Come on. But I guess my sister just put her faith in the Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yep.
She never had anybody call her and pull a scam. I mean, I don't think that whole thing was a scam, but it did cause people to buy things they didn't need.
Oh, yes.
You couldn't talk her out of it.
No, they did. And I think they knew it. I think the Publishers Clearinghouse, quote unquote, knew it. They sold more subscriptions, not because people needed the magazine, but because the possibility of that payout.
Right.
They just, and my mom, over the years, I realize now that you've said it, when my mom died, she had about 50 magazine subscriptions. So, like, I think that was like her buying the lottery, and then this guy called and the idea was fulfilled. She was gone already. She was already rich. But, the heartbreak of it.
Yeah.
And it's not limited. I mean, that's one story, but it's not limited in life at all. And Debbie, to your point, I'm probably going to fall hard on this as well because, I've tried to be the kind of dad that was always ahead of the game. I learned how to use technology. I'm not going to be like I was texting before a lot of parents were texting. I was so cool. I was so with it. I got it. I can do this. I can do all this. Well, guess what? All that is gone. They've left me in the dust. And
I don't understand how it happened either, but I still have to call my kids to get something to work now.
Me too.
I never thought that would happen.
Me too.
Never thought.
I do. And my youngest daughter, she talks about Instagram all the time. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know. Like I don't care about it. Leave me alone. Let me go off into the old age.
I just learned about Instagram, and that's where I followed my daughter's husband. Only my daughter's dead, but the guy who went to Morocco sent pictures back. That's why
Instagram is a lot of artwork and pictures.
Right.
So listen.
I actually have an Instagram account, which I do not post on, but I'm able to see my kids posting everything and my grandchildren, and sometimes some of it is something you don't want to see, So, it's a mixed blessing, but.
Well, and that was my first foray into it was I was early into Facebook. Like I was all over Facebook. In fact, I taught my mother how to use Facebook, and she had never used a computer, and she was so happy to learn because Facebook used to be the place where you saw all the family pictures, and my kids don't use Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
I don't get any family pictures on Facebook. I'm like,
the kids say it's something for your parents or your grandparents.
That's right, and
right.
That's you know what? It's for your parents, and it's also for your high school classmates if you're over 50 years graduated. Like it's a great reconnection for people who are my age. And then the other part of it is 2/3 of it is just sheer advertisement. Just one advertisement after another. But have I changed with the times? No, I have not. I have not. So will I be guilty of being an anti-techer eventually? Yes, I will be. And will I be taken advantage of by someone who's swifter on the technology than me? Probably so. Probably so.
And now we have this thing called AI, which is
Ah.
scary.
Oh, that is scary.
Next, oh, wow.
What next?
Yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about that too the other day because I forget who I called, but I know I was calling a company to get some help because the septic system in my house was not working. And I realized the company that I called had an AI system that dealt with my call entirely.
Right,
Like-
you never talk to a human being.
No, but
No,
it
it's
but it
so
sounded like
aggravating.
a human being. And it
You know, they anticipate the algorithm anticipates what your question is going to be.
Yeah.
And it gives you the answer that is most popular. And it's not always helpful,
No,
but
I
you know,
know.
you don't have to hire a human being.
No, that's right.
But
And the
Yeah.
questions were wide open. Like, oh, hello, I see, and they even knew my name. It said, hello, Mr. Kilgore. I see you're calling from this telephone number. So how can I help you? And so I didn't get it. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I start laying this all out, and then she says, so which of the following things most describes what you need help with? Then I realized.
Were you talking to Optimum? Because that's what exactly they
Yeah.
said.
I know. It's all AI. It's all artificial conversation. And I don't know if you heard it, but you know, with the screenwriters strike that's coming up, they're
They're
saying
going to use AI.
they're going to
yeah.
use artificial intelligence to write scripts for television shows.
And that's why they're striking, because they want to prevent
They're
that.
losing their jobs, yeah.
Right,
I
right.
mean, you know, like,
Especially if the AI writes a better script than the human beings could.
yeah. Well,
Pretty probable,
and
you
they
know.
probably will, because the AI, artificial intelligence, is geared to know exactly what we want to hear. They,
And I think that there was a book review maybe today by someone just, yeah, and the book
Wrote
was
a book, right?
with the help of, 3 AI, whatever it was.
I saw it in the Times, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's, and the worst part of AI is all the things you can do with deep fakes, though. You can actually make it look like someone has said something that they have never said, and you really can hardly tell the difference that it's a manipulated video, and that the speech is not the person's own. They can mimic your tone of voice, your cadence, everything. And that's really scary, because that can cause world wars, It's-
No, I was watching the original, I was watching the original Manchurian Candidate the other night, Frank Sinatra and so forth. Anyway, and I thought about that, where they put chips in this guy's head,
Yeah.
and then he just did what he was told to do. And sometimes, I was thinking about, fast forward, and here we are with this AI, and it's terribly frightening. I don't know what we do about it.
Well,
Yeah.
and so listen, in what may have started as an offshoot, we've come back to the reality of the psalm. The psalm is talking about the deceptions and the problems that are out there in the world, and how easily people can become prey for people whose designs are for harm and for no good. And so here we are. We circled fully back to realizing that the same challenge is in front of us. And so I want to start out a church service in the year 2023 and just say, Lord, defend us. Like, please defend us. We need a defender. People need a defender in this world. And not someone that's coming to sell us a bit of military goods. We need a defender. And where will our defense come from? That's something that comes right out of the psalmist. Where will our defense come from? How do you find defense against a guy who walks up to a house and shoots 5 people because they ask him to stop shooting his gun?
Yeah.
Where do you find safety in a world like this? I don't know. And I guess I'll go back then to Psalm 9. And basically, in Psalm 9, it says, just hold on for the long haul, right? It'll get better. Maybe.
If you survive.
Yeah, maybe, right. But if you don't survive, then somehow better arrives sooner than later because you're now in the arms of God. But I don't know, that's not my idea of how I want to live my life. So I'll cry out to God just like the psalmist does and say, you know, awake. God, you need to wake up to what's happening in the human sphere. And could you please intervene enough to remind human beings that they are only human beings and they don't have the right to tramp around in the domain of God?
This is really getting scary because God could actually be Chat GPT, could be AI. How do we know?
I was thinking,
Now we're going in the realm of some of these movies about, you know, what's actually controlling the entire universe. Is God or is it AI? It's scary now.
I know, that's right.
I'm only kidding. I believe it's God,
I
but
know.
I hope so.
but you
Yeah.
know,
but we have robots now, performing operations. I mean, we have stuff that we never thought would ever exist.
yeah.
Well,
Ouch.
I know it's an extreme statement to end our discussion tonight, but you know, maybe the solution to problem marriages is also right around the corner because you can now have a computer that walks, talks, looks like a robot, but you can control completely. so what is there to fight about?
You think you can control the
Yeah.
computer? It
Well-
may be controlling you.
Well, then
Ouch.
that's just the same as regular human marriage.
This is true.
Like, that's just like
Let that
all
be a lesson.
relationships,
But
right?
competition.
You come in.
Let that be a lesson to you.
All right, my
Oh.
friends, we've come to the end of our time. I thank you again for a very wonderful evening of conversation. Thank you to those of you online for watching and silently, but I know vigorously participating in the topics that we stir up. And I hope that you all have a very good night's rest and sleep. And I'll see you next week.
Good. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
God bless
You're
you.
all-
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.